This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 565 with guest Jay Franze, recorded on March 9th, 2023. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. And, of course, we'll post a show with a few show notes out at the AverageGuy.tv. Don't forget, this month's affiliate sponsor is Nespresso. Use the code MQU328. Get $40 off the machine if you haven't tried it yet. Jay, are you a coffee guy? Do you do much coffee? No coffee?
No coffee at all.
Well, if you were going to start drinking coffee, I'd recommend this Nespresso, right? Little pod, throw it in, hit the button. Not Keurig. Keurig's okay. Nespresso, they spin it, they froth it. You get some really good, these guys are coffee snobs. And so you get some really good, tasty coffee. They have coffee from Colombia and Mexico and different. You can get espresso shots. You can get all kinds of stuff. With it. So if you're ever going to do it, use that code MQU328. And a few of you have. Get $40 off the first machine. I think they're also throwing in a capsule dispenser. Give it a try. Check out Nespresso.com. Thanks for their affiliate sponsorship. And of course, big thanks to Sammy Collison, who that's my daughter, joined me last week. And she's actually just getting back from work right now. But we talked a little bit about library tech. In fact, Neil sent me an email. Neil, thanks for your email. He said, wow, makerspace in the library, very nice. Libraries are very valuable for those not well to do, and that's good as well. Yep. Our village library is small but well connected, and you can even check out videos. Cheers to you, Neil. Thanks for writing that in. Big thanks to Sammy for coming on, and I'm just always surprised what's going on there at the library, and so I'm sure you'll hear more. Big thanks to our Patreon subscribers. If you're finding value in this podcast, you want to give back, join us at theaverageguy.tv/Patreon, and you can do that as well. Jay Franze is with me, Franze and Friends. Jay, welcome back to Home Gadget Geeks.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good to have you. Thanks for filling in at the last minute. Micah Librant was supposed to join us tonight. I was actually going to have Micah and my wife and celebrate International Women's Day, which was yesterday. Those plans fell apart. On that, but we can still celebrate that and hope of those listening did as well support those ladies. But we got you pinch hit, so two guys. Okay, we'll pull it off. How are things over there at Franze and Friends?
Things are good. No, we've pivoted ourselves, and the new format of the show. We've always done leadership, but now the focus is in our strength in our career. So we're focusing on artist development. So Franze and Friends focuses on artist development. We bring guests in to talk about it, talk about different facets of it, anything from microphones and equipment to strategies and planning out album launch or things like that. And then we also, over at the other show, Jay Franze, it's jayfranze.com, but it's the Jay Franze Show. We interview people from the industry, typically artists or musicians that play in and out of Nashville.
Is Fola still helping you out over there?
Fola helps out when we do the more of the leadership style stuff. Cool. But there's a girl, Jen, who helps out with the artist development stuff.
Nice. And you still enjoying it?
Oh no! I mean, this whole new thing we got going on is fantastic. I love it. So we're interviewing people that I've worked with over the past 30 years. So I had a gentleman from the Oak Ridge Boys on the other night. That was really cool. So a big turnout of fans, as you can imagine, with somebody from the Oak Ridge Boys.
Yeah.
So that was good. We've never had that many people in the chat room at one
that's
time.
Cool.
It was
pretty tough to manage when it's flying that fast, isn't it?
It's just like, I'm like, okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the band Von Ray on
nice.
the debut episode. So that was really nice.
Cool.
So they were in the TV show Smallville.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I was just listening to some Steely Dan the other day, and that they'd be I'd forgot Michael McDonald came out of Steely. I mean, he had worked with Steely Dan, and then of course he started working with the Doobie Brothers, and influenced a generation of music in the 80s. I mean, everybody wanted to sound like Michael McDonald for a while, you know.
Talk about a unique voice.
Yeah, yeah, I know for sure. I can't understand a word he's saying, but it sounds good.
Yeah,
It's just kind of fun. It was fun to kind of go down memory lane a little bit with that. And then what I love about like where we are today is kids, you didn't know any of this stuff that was going on with bands. Like you kind of you'd have to read, industry magazines or be in the business or maybe hear. Now MTV changed that a little bit where you got a little bit of news from them. Not like we do today, right? But in those days, you didn't get very much of it, especially in the 70s, right? I mean, it was one of those eras where there was so much. I mean, I think if you think about independent growth of artists, the breakout is really in the 70s and the 80s, right? 50s and 60s are dominated by record companies and manufactured bands and kind of those kinds of right stuff that's put together. Bands really start breaking out in the 70s and 80s to get the deal, right? Their own record deals. It's almost like the internetization of music that happens in the 70s without the internet, right? Where people they're going. So you start looking and you start seeing all these stories. Well, the beauty of it today, we can get all that on YouTube. Like you can go back and watch all those documentaries
right.
on them on YouTube. Will you use so how do you find like for guests to come on that show? How do you I know you've worked in the industry, just making phone calls? Is that
At this
working?
point, yes, that's what I'm doing. I've got the band Von Ray was a big one. I wanted them to be the first episode and everything, and they came on and they were fantastic. And you want to talk about talking about the story of a record deal and how it is not what everybody thinks it is,
Mm,
and how it
yeah.
actually really made them miserable.
Mm,
So it was a very good conversation. I really enjoyed it. And then the guy from the Oak Ridge Boys was just somebody I reached out to and asked if he'd
yeah.
be on the show.
Yeah.
This week we have the guitar player from Reba McEntire. He's one of
Oh,
the
cool.
best studio musicians in Nashville. So he's played on probably every record you probably ever
Yeah.
heard.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
that's
it's fun.
those studio musicians. You don't realize how much they contribute to, and they may be a line somewhere now with the advent of we don't even get albums anymore. First as kids we
Get
could read them on
Spotify.
vinyl, right? And then they went to cassettes, and that got even smaller. I guess CDs got a little bit bigger, but you could go through, and yet the studio musicians who you think of like Toto. They were all just studio musicians. They were all so good. They're like, hey, we got to play together.
Their keyboard player owns a studio. I say here in Nashville. I work out of Nashville,
Yeah.
but he owns a studio there, and he's a super nice guy as well. So maybe call him up one day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, right on. Tony says in chat, this is funny. He says Jimmy Fallon was the last contestant on last night on The Voice and sang a Michael McDonald song and basically said, "I can sing anything because no one understands what Michael McDonald was saying."
True that.
That's very true.
Jimmy Fallon can sing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, he's that kid's got some talent when it comes to that. I mean, he can do a bunch of genres,
Oh yeah, no, he's.
and
I like him.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of talent there. Well, congrats on getting that started, and I think that's going to be. I mean, I think you're going to because as you get some big name guests on, then that will maybe attract others as well who are like, oh yeah, I want to be on that thing.
Yeah, we got a band from LA that's going to be on in a couple weeks, and it's an all-girl band, and it just reminds me back in the '80s. Every single thing in the band is pink.
Oh
Their
yeah,
outfits are pink. Their instruments are pink. I mean, it just looks like a hair band out of the '80s.
yeah,
But it's all girls, and they're just super talented. So be excited to have them on. I mean,
yeah.
some of these people are just super super talented. Just fun to talk to.
Yeah, you just and it's crazy. I mean, when you watch that talent in action, I was watching a YouTube video. I don't know why it just appeared up. Maybe because I've been doing music documentaries and not even related to knowing you were coming on. But I've been watching some music documentaries. Watched someone on Journey the other
Oh
day
yeah,
and one
that
on
was my favorite
Foreigner.
band growing up.
Oh yeah. Well, there's always drama too, right?
Oh
There's
yeah,
always. There's
you
always
should hear
drama.
some of the drama that we hear on these shows.
Oh, I bet. No,
Oh,
yeah. Oh no, I'm sure that there's
and
tons of it.
it surprises me how much they share. Like when I talk to these
Mm.
people, the things that they say on the show, I'm like, I would be thinking you don't want to say that, or but they don't care.
Statute of limitations. It was like
They
25 years ago, right?
Yeah, they just don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah. Well, I think it just goes on, and it is. It is a tough, like when you think about the most successful bands, you're gonna. I mean, that kind of talent, I think, just difficult to work with, difficult to stick with. And then in the 70s and 80s, and probably now, they get rich, and then it's a hard lifestyle. I mean, we start thinking like, oh, how great it must be to be fill in the blank, right? Nah, they're lonely. They're doing drugs. They're drinking a lot. The lifestyle requires a really, a very strict. You got to be here doing this. You got to meet these people. The more famous you are, the harder it is just to get quiet. Everybody's always wanting a piece of you, and you're like, I just want to be by myself, right? And I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't, not in a million years.
The,
Not worth it.
the guy from the Oak Ridge Boys, when I talked to him, super nice guy. I mean, very nice. But I ask everybody before the show, is there anything you don't want to talk about? And he's like, no, I'll talk about anything you want. And I'm like, okay, cool. And it's not like I knew much to ask him about his time in
Yeah.
prison or anything like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
He's like,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
But he got on the show and we're talking, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he's like, "Oh yeah, back in those days, I was really on, heavy on drugs, and
Mhm.
things were rough, and
Mhm. Yeah.
since then I've gotten over." it." He just opens up about all this stuff, and I couldn't believe he was willing to talk about it. And you talk about the being on schedule. They call me from their dressing room. I get these
Mhm.
weird calls and places. Like I talked to an artist this week. He called in from Caesar's Palace. He's like, "Oh yeah, we're playing a show tonight." So okay, well great. So now you're calling me from your hotel room in Caesar's
Yeah.
Palace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you hear the whole
Yep.
crew behind them. You hear makeup coming in, fixing them up, and it's just funny. It's just funny the life they live.
Mhm. Yeah. It's not their own,
No,
right? I mean, they're at that point they become the talent, and
right?
they're told, go do this, get that, perform this way, type deal. Yeah, well, more power to them. I'm glad they do it. I would never want to. I kind of like my quiet. Nobody knows who I am for the most part. Maybe a handful of people, but it's pretty nice that way. So, well, super cool. Thanks for it's fun. Like that era, that 70s and 80s era. That's when I grew up, and so it's just fun to see where they've gone. Some of it's tragic, you know,
Yeah, there's been some rough
So
ones.
yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
mentioned Journey. I mean, that was the band I grew up on. That was my favorite band, and I actually did some work in Nashville with a band that they took me behind the scenes or behind the stage, and I got to meet Journey.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was very nice of
Yeah,
them to do that.
yeah, yeah. That's super cool. Super cool. Of course, their meeting like that happened every night. They parade people in front of them. Hey, meet so and so. Um, who did I have? Who was I talking to? One of my interns, her dad works for a local radio station here in Omaha, and she got to meet Taylor Swift last time Taylor was in
Nice.
town. And Taylor has an assistant that goes behind her and gets the names of everybody, and then Taylor writes little notes and sends them back, kind of thing. And so, like, hey, thanks for they write little clues so that it feels personal. But Taylor's kind of that way. She's kind of that way. She wants her fans to feel special, right? And so it's pretty impressive, I think. If you can, and she has built a monster fan base, right?
Well, she gets a
So
bad rap, but she's very talented and she's very
yeah,
nice.
yeah.
I've never met her, but in town, she's people they disregard her a lot, and but she's
Hmm.
super friendly, super nice. It's just her. I met her dad at the record label. He was nice to me.
Yeah. Well, she's she's got. I mean, with her fans, she's good to her fans, you
Oh
know.
yeah, and
And
like you
so
said, she
it's
doesn't forget it. Well, She
Yeah.
has somebody helping her, but she doesn't forget
Oh
about
yeah.
me.
Well, you'd have to. You'd have to. I need like 10 people reminding me. I can't remember anything. I meet people and 2 minutes later, I'm like, sorry. I've already forgot your name. Well, speaking of who doesn't forget names, let's make this transition.
All right.
We spent some time talking about Chat GPT. I think I said GPT chat earlier, but it is Chat GPT, and it's kind of come storming on the scenes as it's generative pre-trained transformer 3 is what that is, or Chat GPT 3 is some have been calling it. Large scale language model developed by OpenAI came like just screaming on the scenes a couple months ago, and everybody was freaking out about it. Seems like it's settled down a little bit, Jay. But talk a little bit about you said, hey, have you talked about that yet? I'm like, well, not really on the podcast. And so I'm kind of interested. I want to start with, how are you using that? Like, where are you finding value in it right now?
Okay, good. Because I'll tell you, is this is an amazing tool, scary and amazing at the same time. So, and like you mentioned, it started, really heavily a couple months ago. But since then, there's been so many others popping up, and including at educational facilities. So, I mean, people are embracing it, even though they're concerned about it. But how am I personally using it? Is I've done a couple things. I programmed my phone, so we all know you talk to the lady in the phone, right? But I've programmed it to change from talking to her to change to talking to ChatGPT.
Oh,
So now whenever I ask it something, I get a much more detailed answer.
yeah.
So that's incredibly impressive, especially when I'm in the car using like Apple Play or those type of things. So I can just activate it the same way I would activate the other. Now I'm activating this one, and the responses I get are great. Where with the other service, it was hit or miss, and most of the time it was a
Mm-hmm.
miss.
Apple. This is an Apple phone, right? So we're
Yes, I'm
we're
using the
talking about
iPhone,
Siri. Yep, the iPhone.
and
Yep.
so that has been working very good. And other ways I use it, I mean, I've been teaching people, so I teach people how to do show notes, or I teach people how to come up with titles or topic ideas. And it's just amazing how good it is when you work with it. It's not great out of the box. I mean, you have to massage it a little bit. So, say you're talking about a particular subject, I can go in there and say, hey, I want you to write something on artist development. And it'll write something. And I'll say, okay, good, but not what I was looking for. And then I ask it to massage that a little bit. And it will. And it'll just keep going and as
Mhm.
detailed as you want it to. And to the point where it gets close where you're like collaborating with the machine. So who's getting as far as credits and stuff, who's getting the credit for writing that piece at that moment?
Mhm.
So like my wife is a graduate student, and I told her she wanted she's very smart, she's doing very well, she's a history major, and she wanted to do something the other day that she didn't know what it was, and I said, well, just ask this thing. And she's like, no. She refused to talk to it because she's like, that's a form of cheating. And to me, it's only a form of cheating if because you'll Google an answer.
Mhm. Mhm.
So why not just? It's essentially the same
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
and it's what you do with the information you get that makes it different. So if you reach out for the information and then again you tweak it and you massage it and you keep working it until it's if nothing else, it's a collaboration between you and this device.
Yeah, this ethical question of, is it cheating or not? I always, when I think of calculators,
Yes.
like when calculators came out. And there were some people at the time, we would never today, we would never say a calculator is cheating, right? We'd be like, oh yeah, with scientific calculators, advanced calculators. I mean, we just would never say that. It's interesting now to make that switch to, in this language model, while it's being trained by data, it's not necessarily bringing that data back in whole and copying it down as it's writing it, right? It's trying to write it into a natural language model, right? So, as an example, I asked it. tell me everything you know about the Home Gadget Geeks podcast, right? And it found it. And it said the Home Gadget Geeks podcast is focused on technology and gadgets that can be used in the home. The podcast is hosted by Jim Collison and is a part of the Average Guy Network, which is a network of podcasts that covers a wide range of topics related to technology. Not bad, right? I mean, I could. This is a
So
great
far, so
start.
good.
Not bad. Home Gadget Geeks podcast covers a wide variety of topics related to technology and gadgets can be used in the home. Some of the topics that have been covered in the podcast include smart home devices. That is true. Home automation, home security systems, home theater systems, and much more. Right. So it goes on to talk about what we do on the podcast. It's all correct. That's all general too, right? It's not like it's specific, but it says Home Gadget Geeks is available on a variety of platforms, including Apple, Google, Spotify, and others. Um, Listeners can also access the podcast through the Average Guy Network website. Not bad, right? Overall, and then it always does a conclusion statement. They must have changed this because for a while it was always writing in conclusion. That's how
Right.
you could tell
Yeah.
it was it was this, right? It was this tool. In conclusion, oh, you found it. Now it finished with overall. One of the things I could do with that then say is what are some great topics for this podcast? Now, what is interesting about it is it remembers question I just asked it. So it comes back and says the Home Gadget Geeks podcast covers a wide variety. Now, it gets repetitive, right? Have you noticed that with it?
It
Is some of
does.
this?
Unless you tweak your wording to trigger a different response.
Yeah. So when you say that, like, give me an example of how might I tweak that, or what kind of words might I add to get it to give me something different back?
Well,
Do you
maybe
think?
change the phrasing to say something like, provide me with 10 topics to discuss on this week's episode.
Okay. Provide me with 10 topics.
And then out of those 10, you'll probably find 6 of them are worthy. And then what you could do is pick one of those, and then you can now have it write up your descriptions and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I said, provide me with 10 topics. And it comes back. It says, sure, here are 10 topics for the Home Gadget Geeks
Right.
podcast, right? The latest developments in smart home technology, tips for building home theater systems, home security, the benefits and drawbacks of using voice assistants in the home, how to create a smart home on a budget, the role of technology in home energy efficiency, blah, 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 right?
Now, to be fair, that's amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
I
Yeah.
mean, you're not going
No.
to find an assistant in your office that's going to not only come up with it that quick, but come up with that good of a response.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and it's okay. Let's go back to the ethical concerns of this because it is taking what it knows and what it's learned, and then spitting those back out to you. I could say, and I've done this for show notes, like when I had John on from Channels. I said, "Tell me everything that you know about Channels DVR," and it wrote a statement for me right now. Yeah, it's pulling it from the internet, but it's not. I did a quick search to see if I could find that exact text. So a reverse search, take some of those sentences, put them back into Google, and see if Google will find them. Couldn't find them exactly as they had been written. So I think you're right in some regards. What's the difference between that doing it originally and this doing it originally? Like, I'm just going to read articles from the internet. I'm going to write. In fact, the chances of me plagiarizing, I think, are higher than they would be with ChatGPT. Don't you think?
Well, you're going to be definitely more familiar with wherever you're taking the information from. But yes,
Yeah.
I mean, to again, it's what you're feeding it that creates that difference in my head. So it's like we used the example the other day that they have the one where you can type in a description of a painting and it'll come back and deliver you a painting.
Yeah.
And people were getting upset and talking about copyright infringement because you're copying somebody else's painting. But if I told you, hey, go ahead and paint me a picture of a little kid sitting on a park bench bouncing a tennis ball with his dog and do it in the style of Picasso, now is that a copyright infringement? Because I've told it enough differences for that to be a unique painting.
Hmm.
So I think it's the same thing here. If you're telling ChatGPT to create something based on your ideas. For another example, again, I use this device in teaching mode a lot. And I did the other day write a joke in the style of Louis C.K. And it came back with a paragraph of a joke that was like Louis C.K.
Huh. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know how original that joke is, but it was still pretty cool that it was able to do it. It
Yeah.
knew what to
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
one more thing on that is the guests, Scotty Simpson, he's the guy from the Oak Ridge Boys. I did a lot of research on him. I found everything I could find out, and I put my notes together for questions to ask him. But after the show, I was utilizing the tool, demonstrating the tool for people, and I said, all right, let's see if it'll write show notes for this person. And I typed in the information, and to me, I can't confirm this, but I believe the only way it would know this information is if it scanned the audio from the show. So again, I don't know if it does that, but the only way I could find that information was things that he said during the show. So it had to have scraped it somehow.
Yeah. You got to kind of wonder, right? I mean, all right. So I just put in, write me an intro paragraph in the style of Jim Collison, right? So let's see if this sounds like me. It says, sure thing. Here's an intro paragraph for Home Gadget Geeks podcast in the style of Jim Collison. Hello and welcome to the Home Gadget Geeks podcast, where we talk about all things tech and gadgets for your home. I'm your host, Jim Collison, and today we've got a great episode lined up for you. I'm not sure I would say it that way, but that's okay. We'll be discussing the latest developments in smart home technology, from voice assistants to security systems and everything in between. We'll also be sharing some tips and tricks for building a home theater system. Now, you notice here it's putting like in the stuff above it, it put these ideas, these topics in the same exact order. Security, like today episode discussing the latest smart home technology, voice assistants to security systems. Those had been listed in that same order above. We'll also be sharing some tips and tricks on building a home theater that had also been listed above in that. The ultimate movie watching. So grab your favorite tech gadget and settle in because it's time to geek out. I'm
It
not
does a
sure
lot
I'd
of those
say
type
that.
of statements at the end.
Yeah, about all the cool tech that can make your home a smarter, more convenient, and more enjoyable place to be. I guess that's how Chat
I think
GPT
you
thinks
were
I sound.
there up until like maybe the last sentence or two.
The last. So let's geek out.
Yeah, no.
It's time to geek out. Yeah, well, but that's interesting. I mean, again, bring it back around when we think about this in the style of or in the to look like. If a painter took a painting and he took a Picasso. I mean, there are fakes of those classics that people have made, right? And people have to look at them and say, no, this is definitely a copy. In God, it's such a fine line,
But
right,
there's things
between
inspired by it
copying
all the
and
time.
replicating. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, okay, you're in the music business. Like, how hard is that to not be? I mean, how much music has been made, right?
You can tell it to go out there and write a song for you, and it will. I mean, you can tell it to write the musical changes, write the melody, and it does. I mean, again, it's extremely impressive, but
Yeah,
scary at the same time.
yeah.
It really is.
If I said write a song in the style of Michael McDonald, it'd be like, what did you say? What did you
Exactly.
say?
Yes.
Yeah, I know, right on. So one of the things you mentioned, it's pretty good at answering questions. I don't find it super helpful because it doesn't have the most current information. Like you couldn't ask it about a news story from yesterday, but you can historical. It's got a lot of
Right.
history in
Quite
it,
a bit
right?
of data.
You said you put it on your phone in you just you use it like a search engine, then, right?
Yes. Yes.
And what's it doing for you differently than Google or Siri or any of those would do?
To be fair, I mean, I have the Apple devices, and Siri is the one on there. and I use it all the time because of that. But on my desk here, I have the Alexa, and upstairs we have the Google one, and so we have all of them. And I would say the Alexa or the Amazon one is the probably the most accurate, the better of the ones that we get answers from. You ask it a question, and it provides you with an answer. A lot of times I ask Siri the questions and I don't get the answers,
Mm-hmm.
or I get, anything from you'll have to unlock your phone before I can answer this,
Yeah.
or, no, I don't know that, or here's what I found on the web. And then you have to read something. Using it in this manner, basically just creating one of the shortcuts and telling it what to access. And to me, that has delivered a much better response, more in the
Mm.
lines of what you
Okay.
would get with Alexa.
Actually, I threw this in chat. I'll include it in the show notes. I actually wrote a blog post. I wrote this back in February when this thing kind of got popular. How to make the most of Chat GPT, tips and tricks for using a language model for the average guy. The entire article, not the entire, most of it written by Chat GPT. Just to be fully transparent, I wanted to write something about, I wanted to use it to write an article for itself to say how to use stuff. I so it described itself, and then I was asking questions, and then it was answering them, and I would put them in, and sometimes, like you, I'd ask for follow up. Some of the advice though on asking questions, it still says, and this is from itself. It says to ask, make sure you provide, it can provide answers from a wide range of queries, right? To get the best results, it's important to ask clear and concise questions. Yes and no. I've asked pretty vague questions, and it still brings back some pretty good information. Avoid vague or open-ended questions that could lead to ambiguous responses. Be specific about what you're looking for. Pride is Provide as much context as possible. And so I think the one thing that it's really good at is a long question. Like, you put a long question into Google, and it's going to try and word match to it, and it's going to try to provide a sponsored link. Right, that's its job,
Right.
right? Just to be fully transparent. Anything else you found on the search side of things that you found particularly helpful?
As far as the search side, not really. But to tag on to what you just said about the long tailed questions, that's what I've found the most value in. So you could say, I mean, you can start off with, hey, write a 300-word article, like you were talking about your
Yeah,
blog post. You write a 300-word blog post that's SEO friendly, that focuses on this topic, and include these three bullet points. And so you're telling it the extreme specifics of what you want. And it's going to pump out an article. And then if there's a piece of that article that you don't agree with, you can either choose to now rewrite it, or you can just tell it. Like you said, it's an ongoing chat.
yeah,
So you can go back and say, you know what, please replace two with this. And it will replace that one section for you.
yeah,
Or write this section. You can tell it that's too vague. Please be more detailed in the response of number two. And
yeah.
it will. And to me, I had a guest on a little while ago. It was a broadcaster who had just written a book. And I did the research, found everything I needed, and then turned to the chat and asked it to go ahead and see if there was anything I missed. And it went and it found the book, it found everything that was fairly current. So I was pretty impressed with the results it came back with.
Yeah.
And now you mentioned the blog article, right? So
Hmm.
you're upfront and telling everybody that it assisted you in that article. So how do you list the author of the article on the blog? Is it Are you listing you? Are you listing you with the assistance of? I mean, that's where people are
Yeah.
getting a little
Yeah.
hairy, and
Yeah.
I still think it's you, but because you don't say, well, I solved this problem with the assistance of my Texas Instruments. You know,
No, true. I didn't. I figured out this math on my calculator. You
yeah,
don't add that in, right?
right.
You do, you wouldn't even, if you use Google, you wouldn't say I use this. I guess you would cite if you were gonna
Oh, yeah, only if you
cite
found
some
something
things.
specific.
Yeah, if you were gonna do some quotes. I honestly, as you were saying that, I was like, I don't think on this article I gave it credit. This was the first one I wrote, and I wanted to see if anybody'd give me any like, hey, you know, is that right? Now Christian read this and he goes, is that like did you right? He spotted it right away. I think a lot of folks would will as well. Now that I say it and you go in there and look at it, you'll see it all over, right? I mean, it's repetitive in some
Well, as soon as
spaces.
you know the trigger words.
You know, right. Yeah, yeah. Right on. I think I wrote another article called, let me see if I gave credit here. Streamlining blog writing with ChatGPT, the pros and cons of using AI to generate text. And I think, did I give credit here? No, I guess I'm gonna have to go back and, I think,
But that's just it. I mean, if
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
depending
I
on
probably
what
should
you're
now.
putting in there, to me, the more personalized you're making it, you're just getting assistance. It's no different than do you use Grammarly?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when
I
you're
do.
using Grammarly and you write something that's a sentence might be a little jacked up, it says, consider replacing with this sentence.
Right.
Do you replace it?
Almost always.
And do you give Grammarly
No.
credit for your article?
No.
So
Yeah.
again, I
Yeah.
mean, to me,
Yeah.
it depends
Yeah.
on what you're feeding
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, right on. Well, it's going to be a debate, and I think it's going to be a debate that's going to rage for a while. And certainly in the academic space, this has rocked a lot of worlds. And there's been a lot of academics that have come down on either side of this. I think we all expect them to say, no, this is cheating. And there's been some academics who've been like, nope, this is
Right. This is
absolutely
just
use it.
another
Like
tool.
it is just another tool. Listen, it makes my writing a ton better, just to be honest, right? Then I curate it, I cut it, I move some things around, I'll add a few things to it. I did add some sentences on this where I thought they were kind of hokey, and so I went back in and changed them, right? But the majority of it came from it as opposed to me.
You want to know another great way to do it, right? You say your show notes. Say you type maybe 3 paragraphs of a show note. You do it yourself.
Yeah,
You copy that, you paste it into ChatGPT and say, tweak this, make it SEO friendly, make it better. And it pumps out, 3 new paragraphs. Then you copy that and put it in a Word document and you run Grammarly on it. And you say, check this for your grammar.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, it's an entirely new piece than what you put into it. But it all stemmed from what you put into it.
yeah, yeah. It's all original thoughts from you, right?
One more thing too,
Yeah,
my
yeah,
wife, I said she's a graduate student. Her school just implemented their own version of it. I'm sure it probably runs on this, but they implemented their own version. They're not shying away from it. They know you're going to use it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
here's our tool, and this is you can use it all you want, but they're still telling you that hey, look, we can tell if you're using it to write your paper or if you're using it to help you write your paper.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
sure there's ways you can tell. There's probably
Oh yeah,
backing
yeah.
one or
Well,
pointing, but
that weekend it came out. The next weekend, another AI developer wrote an AI tool based on Chat GPT to detect Chat GPT work.
oh, what was that?
Right?
It was called. Oh, I just saw it. I forget what it was called, but yes,
Yeah,
he did that.
yeah. In a weekend, he just coded it up
Yeah,
over the weekend.
he was a doctor or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and listen, I'm, I, it's been interesting as I've used it. I actually have an article that I had a writing service come to me about 6 years ago and say, "Hey, we'd love," and if you have a website, you get this spam all the time. We'd love to put an article that's relevant and full of SEO on your site. And I was like, all right, that sounds good. I mean, like, so they wrote this article. It had some references. I checked it out. Nothing was going to sites that, everything worked. And I put on site. Man, I don't know what happened, but that post does 90% more hits than every other post on my site. So I started pulling it apart, deconstructing it, and using it with ChatGPT's help, expanding on each one of those sections and creating now more material from that one, and still going through it, proofreading it, make sure it makes sense, make sure it's helpful, those kinds of things. And what I wanted to see was, would people land on the original article and then for each one of those sections, so I have a paragraph, it's 10 gadgets to use in learning. So it fits really well to the rest of the stuff on my site, right? And uh so far people aren't clicking the next one down, like, oh, more information, go here. Now they're staying on the site for 4, 5, 6 minutes when they're so, first I thought maybe it's bots.
So
you
they're
know
reading it.
it appears to be reading it. They're not going to the next links. Now I just started doing that, so we'll see where that gets picked up in some of those. So what it's kind of helped me do, I don't like to write, but I love the content that comes out of it. And so around some of that around some topics, it's helped me create some helpful content that I'm like, I would normally not publish, but because it's helping me with the content, I don't know. It's kind of so, producer Bob in chat says definitely prefer Grammarly versus a potential AI based Clippy avatar. Yeah, I don't know. I actually like Chat GPT better than I like Grammarly. It's more, for me, it's more holistic as opposed to just doing word by word or even phrase by phrase, right?
Grammarly's more accurate. It's more accurate
Okay.
with the corrections. I
Yeah.
think ChatGPT is, and Anthony mentioned Chat GPT 0 is the one that detects it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But
Um,
yeah, the ChatGPT to me, it's great for coming up with the ideas. It's great for helping you write something. It gives
yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you could do anything. Like you said, hey, come up with 10 bullet points about this subject. And then you could write the topics, the paragraphs
Yeah.
that go under each
Yep.
bullet point.
Yep. Yep.
So, and then you can use
Yeah.
Grammarly to tweak it. And then by the time you're done, you have something that sounds pretty decent.
One of the things I was thinking about is I was driving home today knowing we were going to talk about this topic. One of the things I was thinking about is how practical could it be for the review of a everybody knows this. If you've been listening to this show a long time, my favorite hardware product ever is a Drobo, right? They're they're on their way out. But say I wanted to write a review of a Drobo and a particular model number, how helpful that would that be for me if I had one of those to then put some things in and have it add some additional. And I can always take the stuff out or change it based on it, but it could give me some things, right? Now, these are words other people have written, right? So we have to be, but would it be things I would have discovered anyways?
I think
What
if you do any sort of research, it will.
And chances are, Jay, I'm gonna write something that's gonna sound like in a space where there's so many words, and if you put enough monkeys in a space with typewriters, eventually they would type War and Peace, right? I sometimes wonder, like, I, what if I was plagiarizing something and I didn't even realize I was plagiarizing it, just because there's already so much content out there, you know?
Well, coming from the world of music, especially commercial music, everything is based, especially in Nashville, it's a number system. So every chord is referenced to a number. So the first
Mhm.
chord of a scale is a one, the second is a two. So you got your number system, and every single hit is a one, four, and five progression. It doesn't have to be in that order, but they're all based on that. And you can throw in the relative minor, which is the sixth minor. So you've got those four chords, and you can just about figure out any song on the radio
Yeah.
because
Yeah, any hit
as long
song.
as you figure out one of those, you can figure out, okay, well then it's this scale,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing. So if you tell it to write you a pop song, and it does, it you can tell it to write the chord progression. It's going to come back with a 1 4 5 in some variation of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a couple things that I think people don't know. I mean, we think of it, what you and I have been talking about, what it's most known for, right? Answering questions, creating text. Couple other things, and I wrote about, no, Chat GPT wrote about this in the article it wrote about itself. The third one would be language translations, right? So I didn't realize this out the chute, but it supports English, Spanish, French, German, and Chinese. And they may be adding more languages to that. So you can take a piece of text, drop it in there, and say, translate this to German. and it will do it for you.
Yeah.
And I haven't checked the accuracy of it, but
Wouldn't know
I
how.
imagine, yeah, yeah. Well, take it out and put it in Google Translator,
Right.
right? Make it translate back. By the way, those are some super funny things sometimes when you have AI translate it and then translate it back. Have you have any need for translations? Have you tried that at all?
Yes, but very rarely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Especially at work. There's occasionally I'll get stuff that comes in typically in Spanish or something,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I just go ahead and use Google Translate and figure out what it is.
Yep, yep.
So for me, that's been helpful. And this will be helpful. It could be extremely helpful. You're talking about writing a blog article. What's to keep you from taking a blog article you've already written, copy the entire thing, put it in there, and say convert to Spanish?
Yeah,
And now you've
yeah.
got you've increased your visibility of that article.
Well, and like Google Translate or Translator, I think Microsoft's Translator and Google is Translate. Um, they're not language models. They're doing translations. I mean, yes, they're doing translations. I wonder if it does like wonder if it tries to get the right grammar or do better grammar. I need to do some testing with this because we do podcasts in most of those languages, if not all of them. What's that list again? Let's see. It was English, Spanish, French, German, and Chinese. Yeah, I do podcasts in all those languages. So would be interesting to see if in the translation itself, if it's a good translation, is it putting it into a Spanish language model and then writing it in a way that makes sense? Because some of those translations I've heard, we've done those kinds of things. In fact, sometimes when we use those tools, we say translated by Google so that people know, hey, we threw this into a translator. This wasn't a real person, right?
Right.
And people always go, yeah, we knew. Right?
Yeah,
You're like, I
we
know, but
figured it out.
I know. We
It's
need
at
to
least
say
an
it.
effort.
Yeah,
I
no one
wonder
to
if it
say
would
it.
translate from Boston to Nashville.
Have you? Did you try? So Joe's asking anyone played with the Bing version of this. I got it in preview and asked it a few questions about free beaches in Grand Canyon, but that's it so far. Have you messed with the Bing version at all?
Not, I haven't gone to the website and messed with their version, but to be fair, Microsoft is one of the owners of ChatGPT, so it's going to be all over their products.
Yeah, yeah, going forward, and it does have footnotes. That's a different so the OpenAI one we've been talking about, the one that kind of launched it all. Still available. They have a paid plan now. I think it's $20 a month if you want to pay for faster and more access to it. The Bing version, I haven't found. I've used it a little bit, but I just haven't found it as helpful. If you haven't used it yet, you need to. I think you still need to get access to it. You have to request access, and they'll grant it. Out the gate, Joe, it wasn't very good for me, and some of the things I asked it to write a blog post, and it wouldn't. you know, and so it was like, yeah, no, I don't really write blog posts. So I think Bing is doing some Microsoft is doing some different things with it. Certainly worth looking at, and the search results are interesting. So I need to spend some more time doing it. We mentioned this earlier. It also does a pretty good job of text summarization. So we talked about expanding text, give it 3 sentences and say write 900 words based on this, right? Or you could give it a paragraph and say write a better paragraph of it, or you can give it a whole bunch of text. I think there's a limit. I don't think you can feed a whole book to it,
Right.
but
No, I think it might be 300 to 500 words somewhere
yeah,
in the
something
book.
like that. Yeah, there's a limit to it, and you can say summarize this, and it'll bring back the main points. It's pretty good at that. That's one of those things where if you had a meeting and a whole bunch of things were done and you wanted to hey, what were the now otter.ai does this very nicely. In fact, if you go to the show notes for this show, you'll see there's a feature in Otter that brings out the major points that you and I talked about in this. And it will give you points with timestamps. You can click on those timestamps, it'll take you right to the audio part. That's kind of cool. And it gets more than half of those. I mean, more than half of those are good. I delete the bad ones, but the good ones, and you go, oh, now all of a sudden summary of the show. It does it automatically. I do a few edits. That would take me 3 hours if I was going to do it myself. That thing processes it in 20 minutes.
I was
You know,
at Podfest, and what's the software that does all that stuff for you? Generates your blog
Otter,
post. No, there was another one.
Swell.
Something show, I think. Cap show.
Oh, Cap Show.
And so to me, this has been better than Cap show. I mean, it'll analyze your stuff. It comes up with the points just like you're talking about. I mean, it's been very good. I've had no
Yeah,
complaints with it. And when there is something bad, you just tweak it.
yeah, yeah. Or make it rewrite it.
Well, that's
Like
tweak
copy it. Like, yeah.
tell
Hey,
it,
I didn't
hey,
like that. Can you
rewrite.
rephrase it?
Yeah, and it
And now
does.
I'm going to say, can you rewrite it in the style of Jim Collison?
Right, which is funny, right? I was
It's
looking. There was
hilarious.
another one. I was trying to look it up. I can't seem to find it. But I sent one to my wife because her biggest complaint with it was it's getting stuff from the internet and it's not citing anything.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
telling you where it
Yes.
found it. And
Yeah.
if you ask ChatGPT to cite it for you, it tells you it cannot do that.
Mm,
So it flat out tells you no, it's not. That's not what this is for. But there's another one, and I don't remember which one it is. That's why I was trying to look it up.
yeah.
But there's another one that does the same thing, and if you ask it to cite it, it will. And it not only cites it, but it'll do it in whatever style citing you want. So if you want an API or APA or whatever you wanted, it will go ahead and cite it in that format for you.
Yeah. Um, Bing will cite as well. So you can automatically, you don't have to tell it to. It'll give you links. Now, what it's getting ready to do is compete with Google for moving things up so you see them, right? So it's going to want to get those links in there so it can charge for those links. I mean, obviously, right? So it's an interesting, the last in the article, the last of five, because if you ask it for a list of things, it'll always give you five. That's kind of another telltale sign. You're like
Tell
five
it,
or
hey,
10.
give me six.
You can tell it that,
I know.
right? Or give me seven, right? Whatever. As a personal assistant, right? It says finally, ChatGPT can use as a personal assistant. It will help you with a wide range of tasks, such as scheduling appointments, setting reminders, or even making reservations. To use ChatGPT as a personal assistant, provide it with clear, specific instructions. Be sure to include any relevant details, such as the date and time of the appointment or the name of the restaurant you want to make a reservation at. ChatGPT can be a useful tool to help you manage your schedule and stay organized. You haven't done that yet.
I have
I
not
haven't
done that.
gotten into the using the AI. I know Google's been doing this for a while. Hey, make a reservation for me at Timber at 6 o'clock on Saturday. And it's supposed to make the call and call them and or whatever and get that done. I haven't done that yet. Have you done anything like that with it?
I use Siri for all that stuff, but I don't use it to make a phone call for me. Yeah, I do use it for all of the reminders or add this to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
calendar and all of these things. Look up the phone number and then it'll say, "Would you like me to dial it for you?" Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I use it for all those things, but I've never had it actually make the call and try to schedule a reservation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I haven't. I haven't yet either. I have to look on that. Couple in that article, a couple tips and tricks. We mentioned this already. Be specific in your requests, but you don't have to. Like that's the crazy thing. You don't. It's not going to not give you information if you're not specific. It just won't.
It's just going to be vague information.
It'll be. Oh, sometimes it's specific. Like it's crazy what it can do. Sometimes it says keep your questions and prompts concise. Again, its wanting is best. The best information it can get. Use proper grammar and spelling. By the way, this is itself telling me what the chip. I've used terrible spelling and it's figured it out. Like, you're like it's doing some correction on us. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's Grammarly on steroids is what it is.
Yeah. Here's the big advice: review and edit the output. Right. The importance is review because it doesn't always get it right. I mean, there's some specific details about me that I got wrong. When I asked it about me, I was kind of digging in. Listen, this thing is really good. Like in my world, right? I'm the Clifton Strengths community manager for Gallup. Clifton Strengths is a very specific tool. It's a tool we have a lot of information on the web about, and I've spoken a lot about it. A lot. There's hundreds of hours of me out there talking about it, right? Um, it's spooky good at strengths. Like you can in both strengths specific to Clifton Strengths, our product, or just strengths in general. This concept of self development, right? Leadership development, team development. It's scary good at like giving advice on some of those things. If you ask it, like, a little, some things about yourself and you give it some things you're good at, it'll give you some pretty good advice, which is a little weird.
Well, I've written 2 books on leadership, and I've punched in a couple topics into ChatGPT, and it's written a better paragraph than I put in the book. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
would have no problem feeding my information into it and having it, give me more better ideas and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I asked it a question like, okay, my Clifton Strengths top five are Arranger, Woo, Maximizer, Communication, Activator. If I were going to, as a podcaster, what kind of advice would you have for me about how to use my strengths for the job I'm doing? That's the question I asked. And it took each one of those strengths and gave me this, yeah, pretty generic, but most coaching is kind of generic anyways, right? And it gave me some really good things to do based on each one of those strengths that was good enough that I could tie it back to like, yeah, that's probably something we said, you know. So it's tied in pretty well.
I had a guest on the show that I had to research. I did not know enough information about the person. And when I put my list of things together, and then I told Chat GPT here to go out and find more information about this person. And it came back with almost everything that I had found, but it had one other thing in there that it mentioned a name. And I was like, I have to find that. I cannot just ask about this name. I have to research it and find it on my own. I wouldn't trust the name. And I did all the search, and I could not find that name anywhere. So I definitely did not bring it up during the conversation. But the other information was everything I had found, everything. So I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it is very impressive.
It's impressive for sure. Joe says before long, it may just be able to do the whole podcast for you.
They've done it.
Yeah.
They've done it.
Yeah.
Matter
No, a
of fact,
converse. Go ahead.
I don't remember what it was. They did an entire YouTube video. You can go find the YouTube video that they used ChatGPT to come up with the content. They told it to turn that into a script. It turned it into a script. I mean, telling you exactly, at this point, such and such enters the frame. And then they used a computer generated video creator to create the video. So the 100% AI through the entire thing,
Mhm.
and it's like a 10-minute YouTube video.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to like I'd love to take the model as it is, and then I'd love to feed it in specifically everything I've ever said on podcasts and train it that way. And then it it could generate in theory, I mean, it's a lot of content. It could generate for me specific content. So I could say, "Hey, I want you to write this." I mean, yeah, I mean, we're joking about in the style of Jim Collison, but then it would really be in the style of Jim Collison, right? And it would have much more it'd have much more information about me than what it well, maybe it's got that already.
Well, if it's truly
Right?
scrubbing audio, then think about
Do
how
you
many
think it is? Do you
podcasts
think it really is?
I have no other way to explain how it had the information it did.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
I mean, no other way.
Okay. Well, it's gonna cause me now this weekend. I'm gonna have to dig in a little bit to see if I can find some things maybe I've only said or like I mean I have a ton the even in the
Well,
um
have
you know
producer Bob help us out.
what oh no hold on Yeah. So producer Bob says, I'm hearing that artwork made with the style of X isn't a copyright violation. Well, any written work could be copyrightable, you know?
Bob,
Um,
help us out and find out if it scrubs audio.
yeah. 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 Um, Joe says the deep fake AI stuff's pretty crazy, and it is for sure. They generated conversations between Joe Rogan and Steve Jobs. It even gets the speech inflections pretty accurate. In
Yep.
10 years, it'll be indiscernible from the
That's
original.
that's the part
Yeah.
that's scary right there.
Yeah. It's not that's not open AI. I mean, deep fake is different, right? It's a different technology, but um
That's
yeah, no, I've
that's
I've
scary.
thought a lot about I've thought a lot about a personal training model. Like in other words, so I've got my own like I would have my own version of ChatGPT that I would train. It would be in the cloud somewhere, and it would listen for things that I've said, or you know, I would train it, right? And then who knows? It may be
Picture,
smarter than me. I'm sure
picture,
it is.
be,
It's not hard. That's
be, picture that being the box on your desk that listens to everything you say.
yeah, but that's where things go wrong. Because like as humans, we do some messed up stuff,
That's what I'm
right?
saying.
Yeah. Yeah. That stuff goes wrong
Catch
for
me
sure.
yelling at my kids or telling a dog to stop barking.
Mm-hmm. It starts swearing at you, it starts getting frustrated and angry, all those things. Um, in another blog post, I was asking it for what are some of the drawbacks, and it said some of the potential drawbacks to using it when you're writing blog posts. One is that the generated text by a model may not always be entirely original, so it admits to that, like may not be entirely original. As the model is trained on a large corpus of text, it may generate text that's similar to existing content. Additionally, the model may not always understand the context of the prompts or seed text, resulting in the text being not relevant or appropriate. Then, one more drawback is that while the model can generate text that is highly readable and engaging, it may lack the personal touch and unique voice of a human writer. This can make text generated by the model feel less authentic and less reliable to the reader. It also can be wrong, can be flat out wrong. So I think there's some, I think there's some caveats in there. It's a tool. It's just a tool. You can't turn it all over to the tool. You still got to do some
Right.
work. It sped up my writing though immensely, immensely. You know. What else? Anything else, Jay, on that? As we're thinking about wrapping this up, would you listen to a podcast? Let me ask you this
No.
question: that was generated
No.
on a subject by Chat GPT?
No. I mean,
Why not? Why not?
wouldn't mind listening to it if it was delivered by a human, because it's the personality, and like you said, it's generating things that are similar to other works out there or other, you know, text on the internet. I think what makes it different is the stories.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
telling stories, so if you get the information delivered to you and then you go ahead and provide a story back, I think that's where the difference is. I don't think it's factual. Yes, um, it's the story that adds the human element. So that's where the difference is going to be. But one other thing that you mentioned that struck me as funny is we do a lot of very technical stuff when it comes to equipment like microphones and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I typed in the thing and I said, okay, give me the, you know, 5 dynamic microphones, you know, the top 5 dynamic microphones or whatever you want to tell it. And it comes back, like you said, with that very generic list. I told it, you know, please provide more detail. And it comes back with like the polar pattern and the switches that are on each microphone. So, I mean, it gets as detailed as you want to tell it to go, but it still doesn't tell you the story behind
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, as of right now, there's still a need for the human behind it.
Yeah. Well, there's no emotion, right? There's no experience. There's no sadness. There's no happiness, right? In these things that all add, the other day, I had this dream. My mom passed away last May. And I hadn't really thought, I hadn't dreamt about her yet, hadn't had any of those. And she popped up in a dream, and it was a silly dream. It was just silly, right? So I was telling, I was telling my wife and my daughter about it. I started crying. Like I was like, And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Like, what's happening to me? It's been 9 months. Like, I thought I had processed that, right? But that memory brought something back. And I came downstairs here, kind of hid, kind of cried for a while, right? But I talk about my mom now a little bit different than I did before that because I went through that emotional experience, right? That for whatever that did in my brain, right? Because it's just a chemical reaction of some kind in your brain, right? Whatever that did in my brain changed some things, changed some feelings for me. And that is, you can that's tough. Maybe someday a computer will be able to, if with a neural net would be able to experience pain and emotion and be able to handle that and have it change it. But today that's still reserved for us humans, I think, you know. And listen, we worry about computers going off the rails. I think Joe was saying earlier, Bing, they've limited Bing so it doesn't go off the rails. Well, listen, if you said some of the things to me that you're saying to Chat GPT or to Bing, I'd go off the rails too. you know.
Make me start
Uh
questioning everything.
yeah, yeah. No, I'd go off the rails. We'll end it on this. Bob says, um, a new product, Mom GPT, the voice assistant that tells you to clean up your mess. And then he says, not a real thing yet, but
Voiced by my wife.
how great would that be? Just like I do you think would you want to live in a world? I like this kind of is the some people think this is the goal, but in the A lady is trying to work her way in on this one as well. But so you wake up in the morning and she says to you, "Do you want me to tell you about your day?" And I think they can do some of that now, like what's on your schedule and some of those kinds of things. Like, I don't know if I want to know about my day at that point, right? Type deal. I don't know if I want a computer telling me like, oh, okay, here's all the meetings you have today. Maybe that'd be helpful to get thinking about them early.
I am all
Some of
for
those kind of
the
things.
the assisted stuff. Like if you can tell me what's on my schedule so I don't miss a meeting, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I practicing all this leadership development type stuff, I find myself all the time preaching use your calendar, do these things. But if I do them, I put the calendar together, I do these things, and I never look at the calendar. So, I mean, I need the reminder to check the reminders, is what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but how could that be if your phone knows where you're at and it's listening to you from what you're doing and it's got some idea what's happening, it could know you're in the meeting or not. And then if you're in a meeting that you're not supposed to be in, it could send a message to your watch that says, "Hey, you're late. Like you need to get to the next meeting." Like,
I've actually had it send a message to me telling me, or not send a message, but I pick up my phone and it's got a message on there saying, you've only got 14 more minutes to get there.
yeah. Yes.
It's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Google's pretty good at that. Google is pretty good about knowing where you're at and how far away you are and like how long is it going to take you with traffic. That's something Google has nailed in their assistant, and it's like, hey, you got this meeting, it's across town, it's not possible for you to be there on time. Do you want me to call and reschedule? That should be the next prompt, right?
But
um
to go back to your comment for one last thing, if you don't
yeah,
mind.
yeah, no worries.
You asked me if I would listen to a podcast that was generated by AI. And if it was delivered by a human, like, because even if we did something as simple as the top five microphones, if you're delivering, you can use that the chat to come up with tell me the frequency patterns or tell me the switches or any of that stuff. And as long as you're delivering it and you're backing that up with some sort of practical purpose, like, hey, this microphone's good for vocals, this one's good for a kick drum, this one's good for a guitar cabinet.
Hmm.
Now you're adding some of that human element into it and you're telling me about an experience. You're adding the story piece to it. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to just listen to something read to me.
Yeah. Read a script, or Brian says about that. He says, if it were like headline news of the day podcast, like AP News headlines or NPR has one of those, right? AI driven, so stories. I mean, it's listenable now. If you had news stories driven by AI voices that were pulling those things together for you, maybe learning your preferences, some of those.
Yeah, like a 30-second clip or something like that.
Yeah, something. Yeah. Well, and I'd be like, tell me the news in the style of Jim Collison. I want to hear it in my voice.
You're gonna laugh one day when it does.
It probably will.
Well, it
It,
can't be that far,
no.
because what's the software, Descript, that you can
Yeah.
change the words and it alters your
Yeah.
speech?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, indeed. We got some interesting things ahead for us. And it is the first time like I've been, everybody's like AI, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, like, look at when you say AI is not really AI for most of this stuff, right? Advanced algorithms or, some just trickery in the programming. But this is getting pretty interesting, you know? And I've spent a bunch of time with it, and mostly around writing, because I kind of wanted to see could it write something that would get popular, or could it write something that would get picked up by Google and get a link, an important link, and drive folks to it. So far, the answer has been no, and there's been some thoughts that Google is able to detect this stuff and is actively pushing it down. I don't know how true that is, but um, so
So, do you think there's a back end watermark that we just don't know about?
it's possible. It's very possible. So they could go back and detect it again easily,
Yeah.
type deal. It seemed like that would be appropriate, right? A digital signature behind the scenes, right? That
Hmm.
you when you copy and paste it, it makes its way into it. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Mm.
Like when you take that text, I mean, basically, you're copying, like, similar to HTML code. And if
Yeah,
you copy HTML, you can have a meta tag in there that says
yeah,
generated by ChatGPT.
yeah. Well, and its style of writing could kind of have a code built into it, right? And then pretty soon it's cryptocurrency. Just kidding.
Nice.
Oh well, it is. We'll end it on this. Joe says, "Read me the news in the style of Samuel L. Jackson." It would just swear at you the whole time. Is what it would do. It would just get mad at you and swear. Well, Jay, thanks for taking the time to pop out this evening. Give me an hour and a half of your time and to chat about this. I'd love to dialogue either in the post, however you're listening to this. If it's later in the podcast, head over to Home Gadget Geeks. No, head over to theaverageguy.tv/HGG565, and that'll be the post for this. And in the comments, I'd love to dialogue a little bit with you on this one. How do you feel about this? I think this one will generate a little bit of I
Ethical
hate it,
buzz.
I love it, whatever. I'd love to dialogue. Be sensible on this thing. But if it's on YouTube, just go down into the comments on the live, or I do watch both channels, the live and the recorded channel. For this, I'd love to dialogue around a little bit. Just get the conversation going. What do you think of this? It's been out a while now. There was a race to be. Everybody wanted to talk about it at first, and I wasn't really going to spend much time talking about it. And then you said you want to, and I'm like, yes, let's talk about it. So thanks for bringing it on. Can you stay for a few minutes?
Absolutely.
Okay, let me wrap this thing up. A couple reminders for folks hanging around. If you want to join in, we can take this conversation to the Discord chat as well. If you want to head out there, head out to theaverageguy.tv/Discord. You can leave me a message. If you can't make any of these things or you don't want to leave chat, you can leave a 30-second message out at homegadgetgeeks.com. Just send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, after you leave the message. And all you have to say is left a voicemail message. And I'll know to go over there and check it. I don't get too many over there, so I need a reminder to go over and check it. Don't forget the AverageGuy.tv platform, both web and media hosting, powered by Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. Plans start as little as $10, and they're still $10. Inflation fighting plans over there at Maple Grove Partners. Check it out, maplegrovepartners.com. Then don't forget our March's affiliate sponsor, HelloFresh, here at the end. In fact, I just got a email from HelloFresh. They had been delivering on Sundays, and they said, sorry, we're not doing Sundays anymore. FedEx doesn't want to do that. We're moving to Saturdays. We'll give you $10. I thought, okay, that sounds all right. Thanks for the credit. That works for me. Really love what's going on over there. You can save as much as $110 on your first 5 boxes of HelloFresh and $40 on the first box alone. Check it out today. TheAverageGuy.tv/HelloFresh. Change the way I eat. I'm eating a ton better. And thanks, HelloFresh, for doing that. You can contact me, like I said, Jim at TheAverageGuy.tv, on Twitter at Jay Collison. Subscribe, rate, review, all that other stuff, no matter where you listen. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at TheAverageGuy.tv/live. I know you're dying to know, but next week, Mike Weger is back. So, well, and last time I said that, Jay, they thought I meant like back forever.
For good.
No, just for one show. Uyghur's back. We'll be. Aaron Lawrence sent me some beer, so we'll be drinking Alberta beer and Mike Uyghur. I'm sure hockey will launch into the podcast somehow. We'll get some things done, and then Aaron's coming on at the end of the month. But we are live. Mark moved his. We're going to do a barbecue show that got moved into late April, so you want to hang around for that as well with Mark Robson. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at TheAverageGuy.tv/live. For those of you listening live, Bob, Brian, Joe, I saw Ken a little bit earlier, and Tony, thanks for listening. Thanks for coming out. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.